Adriana Vale stood on a Manhattan sidewalk, one hand clutching an ultrasound image, the other pressed against her barely swelling belly, and watched her husband hand the keys to a $60,000 Mercedes to a woman young enough to be his daughter. The girl squealed. Lucien smiled. And when he finally noticed his wife standing there, 12 weeks pregnant with his child, he looked at her like she was an interruption to his afternoon. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside Adriana. The heartbreak she expected never came. Instead, ice-cold clarity flooded through her veins. Because Lucien DeMarco had just made the most expensive mistake of his life. He had forgotten who truly built his empire. If you want to see a powerful woman reclaim everything stolen from her, stay until the end. And when you're done, hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Adriana's story travels. The November wind cut through the canyon of buildings on Fifth Avenue, sharp enough to make Adriana's eyes water. Or maybe that was just convenient timing. She could blame the cold for the moisture gathering at the corners of her lashes instead of admitting that watching your husband publicly humiliate you might actually hurt. She had left the doctor's office 20 minutes ago, still floating in that strange bubble of disbelief that comes with unexpected news. 12 weeks. 3 months. She had been carrying Lucien's child for 3 months without knowing, too busy managing the legal infrastructure of his so-called legitimate business empire to notice her own body changing. The irony wasn't lost on her. Dr. Morrison had smiled warmly as she handed over the ultrasound images, the grainy black and white photos that supposedly showed a tiny human but mostly looked like a blob with good potential. "Congratulations, Mrs. DeMarco. Everything looks perfect. Have you thought about how you'll tell your husband?" Adriana had smiled back, already imagining the moment. Maybe over dinner at Maria, their favorite restaurant, or perhaps something more intimate, just the two of them in the penthouse, with the city lights spread out below them like scattered diamonds. She had even entertained a foolish fantasy where this news might bridge the distance that had been growing between them for months. The way Lucien's eyes had started sliding past her at social events, the way his phone calls had become hushed and secretive. She had told herself it was business stress, the expansion into Chicago, the new political connections that required careful handling, the federal investigation that kept circling closer, never quite landing, but never fully going away either. She had told herself a lot of things. The walk from Dr. Morrison's office to Lucy N's supposed business meeting at the St. Regis should have taken 15 minutes. Adriana had made it in 12, her heels clicking against the sidewalk in a rhythm that matched her suddenly racing heart. She wanted to tell him now, immediately, before the cautious, analytical part of her brain could talk her out of spontaneity. She had rounded the corner onto 55th Street, already rehearsing the words, when she saw him. Lucien DeMarco stood in front of the hotel in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, his silver-touched dark hair perfectly styled, his smile wide and genuine in a way Adriana hadn't seen directed at her in months. He was holding out a set of car keys, and attached to those keys was a young woman who couldn't have been more than 23. Blonde, tall, wearing a dress that probably cost as much as the suit but covered approximately 1/10 of the surface area. The girl's squeal of delight carried across the street. "Lucien! Oh my God, you didn't!" "Only the best for you, princess." His voice was warm, indulgent, the same tone he used to use with Adriana back when they were first married, back when he still looked at her like she mattered. The girl threw her arms around his neck. He caught her easily, lifting her slightly off the ground, and Adriana watched her husband kiss another woman with the kind of passion that used to make her knees weak. The ultrasound images crumpled slightly in her grip. She should leave. She should turn around and walk away before this moment burned itself any deeper into her memory. But her feet had apparently decided to root themselves to the sidewalk, forcing her to witness every detail of her humiliation in high definition. The Mercedes was parked at the curb, gleaming silver with a red bow on the hood like something out of a commercial. The girl was bouncing on her toes now, running her hands over the leather interior, while Lucien watched with obvious satisfaction. "You're too good to me," the girl gushed, turning back to kiss him again. "You deserve it, Natasha, after everything you've put up with." Put up with. The words landed like a slap. What exactly had this child put up with? Secret phone calls? Stolen afternoons? The terrible burden of accepting gifts from a married man. Adriana's phone buzzed in her purse. Probably her assistant, confirming tonight's dinner reservation. The one she'd made specifically so she could tell Lucien about the baby over champagne and oysters. The reservation she'd stupidly thought might mark the beginning of something beautiful instead of the end of everything. She started walking. Not away, toward. Her body moved on autopilot while her mind went somewhere cold and distant, a place where emotions couldn't reach her. She had learned that trick early in her marriage, back when she first realized that loving Lucien DeMarco meant making peace with certain realities about who he was and what he did. But this was different. Adriana? Lucien's voice cut through her thoughts. She looked up to find him staring at her, the girl, Natasha, still draped across his arm like an expensive accessory. His expression flickered through several emotions in rapid succession. Surprise, annoyance, guilt, and finally settling on irritation, as if her presence was an inconvenience he shouldn't have to deal with. "What are you doing here?" he asked. The question was so absurd that Adriana almost laughed. What was she doing here? She was his wife, the mother of his unborn child, the woman who had spent the last 6 years building the legal framework that let him pretend his money came from restaurants and real estate instead of the darker enterprises his family had run for 3 generations. "I came to tell you something," she said quietly. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears, calm, measured, completely devoid of the rage and hurt churning in her chest. Lucien glanced at Natasha, then back at Adriana. "Can it wait? I'm kind of in the middle of something." In the middle of something, like buying his mistress a car was an important business transaction that couldn't be interrupted. Adriana held up the ultrasound images. "I'm pregnant." The words dropped into the space between them like stones into still water. She watched the ripples spread across Lucien's face. Confusion first, then recognition, then something that looked almost like panic. Natasha's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. "Wait, what?" "Adriana." Lucien's tone carried a warning she knew well. The same tone he used with his associates when they stepped out of line. "We'll talk about this at home." "Will we?" She tilted her head slightly, studying him like he was a stranger. Maybe he was. Maybe he had been for a long time, and she'd just been too busy managing his empire to notice. "Or will you be too busy? You seem to have a very full schedule." His jaw tightened. "Don't do this." "Not here." "Why not here?" The coldness inside her was spreading, numbing everything it touched. "You didn't seem to mind making a public spectacle a moment ago. I thought perhaps you enjoyed an audience." Natasha stepped back from Lucien, her expression shifting from confusion to something sharper. "She's your wife?" "Ex-wife," Lucien said automatically, and that was when something fundamental broke inside Adriana. Not her heart. That would imply she still had expectations, still harbored some foolish hope that the man she married might actually care. No, what broke was different. It was the last fragile thread of loyalty that had kept her tethered to him despite every warning sign, every red flag, every moment when her instincts screamed that she should protect herself. "Not yet," Adriana said softly. She looked at Natasha, really looked at her, and saw what Lucien probably saw. Youth, beauty, the kind of uncomplicated adoration that came from not knowing who he really was. But soon, very soon, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the sidewalk in that same steady rhythm. Behind her, she heard Lucien call her name, heard the sharp exchange of words between him and Natasha, but none of it mattered anymore. The ultrasound images were still clutched in her hand, slightly wrinkled now, but intact. She looked down at the grainy blob that was supposedly her daughter. Dr. Morrison had seemed fairly confident about the sex, and felt something fierce and protective surge through her. "It's just you and me now," she whispered to the image. "And I promise you, sweetheart, I'm going to make sure you never have to rely on a man who treats you like an inconvenience." Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered, "Mitchell." Her voice was crisp, professional, betraying nothing of the chaos swirling beneath the surface. "I need you to pull every file we have on Lucien's business structure, every shell company, every property holding, every account. I want the full organizational chart on my desk by tonight." Her lawyer's surprise carried clearly through the phone. "Adriana, is everything—" "Everything is fine," she interrupted. "Better than fine. I'm finally thinking clearly. How quickly can you assemble a divorce team?" 48 hours, maybe less if do it in 24. And Mitchell? This is going to get complicated. I need people who can move fast and keep their mouths shut. You're scaring me a little. Good. You should be scared, because we're about to dismantle an empire, and I need to know you're ready for that level of warfare. A pause. Then, I've been ready for this since the day you married him. Adriana smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Then let's begin. She hung up and kept walking, her mind already 3 steps ahead, calculating angles and leverage points with the same precision she'd once used to protect Lucien's interests. The same skills that had made his business untouchable would now be used to tear it apart from the inside. Because here was the truth Lucien had somehow forgotten in his arrogance. Adriana Vale hadn't just married into the DeMarco family. She had rebuilt it. Every legitimate business front, every carefully structured LLC, every offshore account that kept the federal investigators at bay. Those were her creations, her architecture, her genius. Lucien thought he was powerful because he commanded respect through fear and family legacy. He had no idea that his real power had always come from the quiet woman who worked 18-hour days to make sure his empire appeared legal, stable, and completely above reproach. She had been invisible by design, preferring to work behind the scenes while Lucien played the role of feared syndicate boss. It had seemed strategic at the time. Let him have the glory while she built something real and lasting. What a mistake that had been. By the time Adriana reached her car, a modest sedan she'd always preferred to Lucien's ostentatious collection, she had already mentally categorized every asset she could strip from his control. The restaurants were hers. She'd structured those deals personally and made sure her name was on every crucial piece of paperwork. The properties in Brooklyn and Queens, also hers, buried under 3 layers of corporate entities that only she fully understood. Even the offshore accounts had her fingerprints all over them, access codes she'd created and never bothered to fully explain to Lucien because he'd never asked. He had made the fatal error of assuming she was an assistant to his empire rather than its architect. She drove to her office, not the penthouse she shared with Lucien, but the small legal consulting firm she'd maintained separately, the one she'd told him was just a hobby to keep herself busy. The office that was really an insurance policy she'd been building for 3 years, ever since the first time she caught Lucien lying about where he'd been. Her assistant, Rebecca, looked up in surprise when Adriana walked in. "I thought you had the day off." "Change of plans." Adriana set her purse down and pulled out her laptop. "Cancel everything for the next 48 hours. And I mean everything. No meetings, no calls, no interruptions unless the building is literally on fire." Rebecca's eyes widened. "What's happening? I'm getting a divorce." "Oh." A pause. "Should I say I'm sorry?" "No." Adriana's fingers were already flying across the keyboard, pulling up documents she'd hoped she'd never need to use. "You should probably say congratulations." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of legal documents, phone calls, and strategic planning. Mitchell arrived with his team at 7 p.m., carrying banker's boxes full of files that represented 6 years of meticulous record-keeping. "Jesus Christ, Adriana." He spread the organizational charts across her conference table, his expression somewhere between awe and horror. "You own everything. I mean, I knew you were involved in his business structure, but this... He doesn't actually own anything, does he?" "No," she said simply. "He doesn't. Every major asset is either in my name, held by a company I control, or protected by agreements I wrote that put me in the position of primary authority. Lucien has signature power on maybe 30% of his supposed empire, and even that's contingent on provisions I can trigger." Mitchell sat down heavily. "Why did you structure it this way?" "Insurance." Adriana pulled up a spreadsheet showing cash flow for the restaurant group. "I told myself it was to protect us both if the federal investigation ever got serious. If they came after Lucien, I could claim the businesses were mine, operated independently of his other activities. Plausible deniability." "But really," she met his eyes, "really, I think I always knew this day might come. I just didn't expect it to hurt quite so little when it finally did." Her phone had been buzzing all evening, calls and texts from Lucien that she ignored with increasingly bitter satisfaction. Let him panic. Let him wonder what she was planning. Let him feel for once what it was like to be dismissed and diminished. At 9:30, she finally read his messages. Where are you? Adriana, we need to talk. Don't do anything stupid. I can explain about Natasha. Call me now. That last one made her laugh out loud. The audacity of that man, issuing orders like she was still his subordinate instead of the woman who held his entire world in her hands. She texted back, I'm working. Some of us have actual jobs. His response came immediately. I'm coming to the office. Don't bother. I won't be here. Which was true. By 10 p.m., she was on her way to the penthouse to pack. Not everything. She didn't need everything. Just the essentials, the things that mattered. Her clothes, her personal files, the small box of jewelry her grandmother had left her. Everything else could stay. It was all tainted now anyway, purchased with money that came from sources she'd spent years helping to obscure. The penthouse felt like a museum when she walked in, all cold marble and expensive art that neither of them had actually chosen. An interior designer had done it, selecting pieces that looked impressive but meant nothing. Adriana had always hated this place, its sterile beauty a constant reminder that their life together was more performance than reality. She was in the bedroom, methodically emptying her closet, when she heard the front door slam. Adriana! Lucian's voice echoed through the cavernous space. She could hear his footsteps, heavy and rapid, crossing the living room, charging toward her like he had any right to be angry. She didn't stop packing. He appeared in the doorway, his expensive suit rumpled now, his perfect hair slightly disheveled. What the hell do you think you're doing? Leaving. She folded a cashmere sweater with careful precision. I thought that was obvious. We need to talk about this. No, we really don't. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing her wrist hard enough to make her drop the sweater. Yes, we do. You can't just walk away. You're my wife. Adriana looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his face. Let go of me. Something in her tone must have registered because his grip loosened immediately. She pulled her arm back and rubbed the red marks his fingers had left. You're overreacting, he said, his voice shifting to the placating tone he probably used with Natasha. I know what you saw looked bad, but looked bad. The laugh that escaped her was sharp enough to cut. Lucienne, you gave your mistress a Mercedes while I was literally holding proof of your child. You called me your ex-wife. In what universe is that just looking bad? Natasha is... she's nothing. A distraction. You know how it is. Actually, I don't. Please enlighten me. How is it? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. You've been so busy with work, so distant. A man has needs. Needs. She repeated the word like it was foreign. You had needs, so you bought a child a car and humiliated your pregnant wife on a public street. Yes, that seems perfectly reasonable. Don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic, I'm being precise. There's a difference. Lucian's expression hardened. Fine. You want precision? I'll give you precision. You are not leaving. You are not filing for divorce. You're going to calm down, and we are going to figure this out like adults. Or what? The question hung in the air between them. She watched him struggle with it, saw the exact moment when he reached for the intimidation tactics that worked on everyone else in his life. Or you'll regret it, he said quietly. You think you can just walk away from this family? From me? Adriana, you know things. You've done things. If you try to leave, if you try to expose me, you'll destroy yourself in the process. Is that a threat? It's reality. She smiled then, and it was the coldest expression she'd ever worn. You're absolutely right, Lucian. I do know things. I know where every dollar is hidden. I know which judges you've paid off and which politicians you own. I know the real ownership structure of every supposedly legitimate business you run. I know passwords and access codes and security protocols that you don't even know exist. His face paled slightly. And here's what you apparently don't know, she continued, her voice steady and merciless. I also know how to make all of that disappear, how to restructure everything so that your name is nowhere near it, how to leave you standing in the middle of nothing while I walk away with everything. You wouldn't dare. Try me. They stared at each other, the full weight of 6 years of marriage condensed into this single moment of perfect clarity. Adriana could see him recalculating, trying to figure out if she was bluffing. She could also see the exact instant when he realized she wasn't. The baby. he said finally, desperately. Think about the baby. Our child deserves both parents. Our child deserves better than a father who cheats on her mother and threatens his wife when he gets caught. I never threatened you. Didn't you? She picked up the sweater she'd dropped and added it to her suitcase. You told me I'd regret leaving. That sounds like a threat to me. Adriana, please. His voice cracked slightly. I made a mistake. I'll fix this. I'll end things with Natasha. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't leave. For a moment, just a brief, treacherous moment, she almost believed him. Almost let herself hope that they could repair this, that the man she'd married was still in there somewhere beneath the layers of arrogance and entitlement. Then she remembered the way he'd looked at Natasha, the genuine warmth in his smile, so different from the cold calculation he usually wore around Adriana, the way he'd called her his ex-wife without hesitation, like their marriage was already over in his mind. No, she said simply. What do you mean no? I mean no. I don't want you to end things with Natasha. I don't want you to fix this. I don't want anything from you except a divorce and the life I built for myself back. She zipped the suitcase closed and pulled it off the bed. Lucienne moved to block the doorway. Move, she said. We're not done talking. Yes, we are. Move or I call security and have you removed from my penthouse? Your penthouse? He laughed, but it sounded hollow. Adriana, this is mine. It's in my name. Check the deed if you don't believe me. She pulled out her phone. I'm going to count to 3 and then I'm making a call. 1? You're being ridiculous. 2. Adriana. 3. She dialed. He moved. The security guard who met her in the lobby was one she'd specifically hired 2 years ago, ex-military, completely loyal and utterly discreet. He took her suitcase without comment and escorted her to her car, standing watch until she drove away. In her rearview mirror, she could see Lucien standing in front of their building, his phone pressed to his ear, probably calling lawyers who wouldn't be able to help him, because the best lawyers in the city already worked for Adriana. She'd made sure of that years ago. She drove to a hotel in Midtown, checked in under a false name, and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the day. She sat on the edge of the bed, one hand pressed to her stomach where her daughter was growing, and tried to reconcile the woman she'd been this morning with the woman she'd become tonight. This morning, she'd been Adriana DeMarco, dutiful wife and invisible power behind a criminal empire. Tonight, she was Adriana Vale again, the name she'd been born with, the identity she'd almost forgotten. And she was free. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mitchell. Initial filings ready. Say the word, and we move. She looked at the ultrasound image one more time, at the tiny blob that would someday be a person. Her daughter. Her responsibility. Her reason for burning everything down and building something better from the ashes. Do it, she texted back. Burn it all down. Then she turned off her phone, laid down on the starched hotel sheets, and slept better than she had in years. The morning came too quickly, and not quickly enough. Adriana woke at 5:30 with her hand still pressed protectively over her stomach, her mind already racing through the tactical moves she needed to execute before Lucien fully understood what was happening. The hotel room was anonymous and sterile, nothing like the penthouse she'd left behind, and that anonymity felt like armor. She showered quickly, dressed in a charcoal suit that meant business, and was in her office by 6:15. Rebecca was already there, looking like she'd been up all night. Please tell me you slept, Adriana said, setting down 2 coffees she'd picked up on the way. A little. Rebecca accepted the coffee gratefully. Mitchell's team has been working through the night. They're in the conference room. The conference room looked like a war room. 3 lawyers huddled around laptops. A paralegal was buried in file boxes, and Mitchell stood at the whiteboard mapping out what looked like a corporate org chart that would have made a conspiracy theorist weep with joy. Jesus, Mitchell, when did you get here? He turned and she could see the exhaustion in his eyes despite the sharp focus. Never left. Once we started pulling threads, the whole thing just unraveled. Adriana, I knew you were thorough, but this... He gestured at the whiteboard. This is architectural genius, or insanity. I honestly can't tell which. She studied the diagram, recognizing her own handiwork from years of careful construction. Every business Lucien claimed to own was represented, along with the shell companies holding entities and trust structures that actually controlled them. And running through it all like golden threads were her fingerprints, her names on documents, her carefully crafted legal language, her access codes and authorization protocols. "How bad is it for him?" she asked. "Catastrophic." Mitchell pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop. "If we execute the plan we outlined last night, Lucien loses approximately 87% of his liquid assets, 92% of his property holdings, and 100% of his access to offshore accounts. The restaurants, the real estate portfolio in Brooklyn, the warehouse conversions in Queens, all yours. The only things he actually owns outright are his car collection and the yacht." "The yacht has a lien against it," Adriana said absently, remembering the paperwork she'd filed 6 months ago. "I structured that loan myself. If payments stop, it reverts to the lending company, which I own." One of the junior lawyers actually laughed, then tried to cover it with a cough. "So he gets the cars," Mitchell said. "That's it. That's what's left of the DeMarco empire after you're done." Adriana felt nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction, just the cold certainty that this was necessary. "What about the timeline?" "We can start filing this afternoon. Divorce petition first, along with a motion for emergency asset protection citing your pregnancy and his infidelity. Then we trigger the restructuring clauses in all the major business agreements. By tomorrow morning, his lawyers will be drowning in paperwork." "His lawyers won't know what hit them," one of the other attorneys added. She was young, sharp-eyed, hungry. "Most of these agreements have provisions they've never even read, buried in the fine print, subsection after subsection. It's beautiful work." "It was necessary work," Adriana corrected. "Lucien's family has a lot of enemies. I needed to make sure that if anything happened to him, I could protect what we'd built." "Well, now you're using those protections against him," Mitchell said. "How does that feel?" "Ask me when it's done." Her phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. She glanced at the screen and saw a flood of messages, all from Lucien's associates, his underboss, Marco Castellano, his consigliere, Vincent Price. Even his mother, Isabella DeMarco, the matriarch who'd never quite approved of Adriana, but had grudgingly accepted her competence. She ignored them all. "He's mobilizing," she said, "calling in favors, trying to figure out what I'm planning." "Let him scramble," Mitchell said. "By the time he understands the scope of this, it'll be too late to stop it." Adriana nodded, but something nagged at her. Lucien wasn't stupid, despite yesterday's catastrophic lapse in judgment. He'd built his reputation on being 3 steps ahead, on anticipating threats before they materialized. The fact that he hadn't seen this coming meant either she'd hidden her preparations better than she thought, or he'd been so arrogant that he never considered she might leave. Probably both. "What about the federal investigation?" she asked. "If we start restructuring everything, won't that draw attention?" Mitchell grimaced. "Already thought of that. The good news is that the restructuring is technically legal. You're just exercising rights you already had in these agreements. The bad news is that it's going to look suspicious as hell, especially combined with a divorce filing. Can they use it against me? Possibly. But here's the thing. If they come after you, they have to prove you knew about Lucien's illegal activities. And you've been very careful over the years to maintain plausible deniability. Every document you've created, every structure you've built, it all looks like legitimate business management." "Because it is legitimate business management," Adriana said. "The fact that some of the money flowing through those businesses comes from questionable sources doesn't change the legal framework I created." "Exactly. You're a lawyer doing your job. If your client happens to have other income streams you don't know about, that's not your fault." Adriana had told herself that story for years. She wondered if she'd ever actually believed it, or if she'd just gotten good at pretending. Her phone rang. This time it was Isabella DeMarco. Adriana stared at the screen for a long moment, then answered. "Mrs. DeMarco." "Adriana." Isabella's voice was cool, controlled, with just a hint of the Italian accent she usually suppressed. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do." "My son tells me you're leaving him, that you're pregnant with his child and you're planning to take everything in the divorce." "Your son is partly right. I am leaving him and I am pregnant." "But I'm not taking everything. I'm simply reclaiming what was always mine." A pause. Then, "You're making a mistake." "No, Mrs. DeMarco. I made a mistake 6 years ago when I married your son. I'm correcting it now. You think you can just walk away from this family, from our world? Adriana, you know too much. You've done too much. There it was. The same veiled threat Lucien had tried last night. Adriana almost laughed at how predictable they were. Let me be very clear, she said, her voice dropping to a register that made Mitchell look up sharply. I have spent 6 years protecting your family's interests. I have built legal structures that have kept federal investigators at bay, turned dirty money into legitimate businesses, and created the appearance of respectability where none existed. I did this because I believed in what we were building together. And now I'm done. I'm taking what's mine, and I'm leaving. If anyone in your family tries to stop me, if anyone threatens me or my daughter, I will burn everything to the ground. Every account, every protection, every carefully constructed legal shield, gone. And when the ashes settle, I'll be in witness protection with immunity, and you'll all be in prison. Do you understand me? The silence stretched so long that Adriana thought Isabella might have hung up. Then, you've changed. Yes, Adriana said. I finally woke up. She disconnected and found the entire room staring at her. That was, the junior lawyer started. Necessary, Adriana finished. They need to understand that I'm serious, that I'm not some scorned wife acting on emotion. This is strategic, and if they push me, I'll push back harder. Mitchell was grinning. You just threatened the DeMarco family matriarch with witness protection. That's either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's leverage. She knows I have the documentation to destroy them. The question is whether I'm willing to destroy myself in the process. Adriana met his eyes. And after yesterday, I think they all know the answer to that. By noon, the divorce petition was filed. By 2 p.m., the first wave of business restructuring had begun. By 4, Adriana's phone was ringing non-stop with calls from lawyers, accountants, and increasingly panicked members of Lucien's organization. She ignored them all and focused on the next phase, disappearing. The apartment she'd leased 3 months ago under a corporate entity Lucien didn't know about was in Tribeca, deliberately chosen for its security and anonymity. The building had excellent cameras, a doorman who actually paid attention, and enough wealthy residents that one more woman coming and going wouldn't attract notice. She'd been preparing this bolt hole for longer than she wanted to admit, moving important documents and personal items there gradually, creating a life she could step into if everything fell apart. She told herself it was paranoia. Insurance against a husband whose business involved constant danger. Turned out she'd been preparing for a different kind of danger entirely. Rebecca helped her move the last of her essential belongings that evening, working with the kind of efficient silence that came from understanding when to ask questions and when to just help. Are you scared? Rebecca asked finally, as they unpacked boxes in the new apartment. Adriana considered the question. No, I'm angry, and I'm done being invisible. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mitchell. Lucien's lawyers are requesting an emergency meeting. They're panicking. She smiled grimly and texted back, let them panic. No meetings until Friday. That gave her 2 more days to complete the restructuring. 2 more days to strip away everything Lucien thought he owned and reveal the truth, that his empire had always been built on her brilliance, not his strength. The next morning brought chaos. Adriana was in her office reviewing the offshore account transfers when Mitchell burst in without knocking, his face flushed with something between excitement and alarm. You need to see this. He thrust his phone at her. It was a news article from the New York Financial Times. DeMarco Restaurant Group faces unexpected restructuring amid ownership dispute. Adriana's stomach dropped. How did they get this so fast? Someone leaked it, probably one of the lawyers who got served with the restructuring notices. The business press is all over it. He scrolled to another article. This one's speculating about connections to organized crime. This one's talking about a power struggle within the DeMarco family. And this one, he paused. This one has a quote from Lucien. She grabbed the phone and read, These allegations are completely false. My wife is going through a difficult time, and I'm hopeful we can resolve our personal issues privately. The business operations of DeMarco Enterprises remain stable and unaffected. He's lying, Adriana said flatly. Of course he's lying. But he's doing it publicly, which means he's trying to reassure investors and partners. The problem is that the financials tell a different story. Adriana pulled up her own laptop, accessing the real-time cash flow data from the restaurant group. He's already experiencing liquidity issues. 3 of his major suppliers are demanding payment up front because his credit lines just got frozen. You froze his credit lines? I restructured the corporate guarantees that back them. Without my signature, the banks won't extend credit. She pointed to another spreadsheet. And here, see this? His property management company can't make payroll because the accounts are locked pending ownership verification. Mitchell whistled low. You're strangling him financially. I'm taking back what's mine, she corrected. There's a difference. Her phone rang. This time it was Marco Castellano, Lucien's underboss and oldest friend. She answered on speaker. Adriana, we need to talk. Hello, Marco. What the hell are you doing? You're killing him. You're killing all of us. I'm extracting myself from a bad marriage. What happens to the rest of you is not my concern. Not your concern? His voice rose. You built this with us. You're part of this family. You can't just tear it apart because Lucien made a mistake. A mistake would be forgetting an anniversary, Marco. What Lucien did was a choice, a series of choices, and now I'm making my own choices. The feds are circling. You know that, right? They're watching for any sign of instability, any crack they can exploit. You're giving them exactly what they need. Adriana felt a cold spike of concern. Marco wasn't wrong. The federal investigation had been dormant for months, but a sudden restructuring of Lucien's business empire would absolutely draw their attention. Then Lucien should have thought of that before he publicly humiliated his pregnant wife, she said. Adriana, please, think about what you're doing. I have thought about it, Marco. For 6 years, I've thought about what's best for this family, what's best for the business, what protections we need. I've sacrificed my career, my reputation, my own identity to build something stable and legitimate out of the chaos Lucien inherited. And yesterday, I watched him give his mistress a car while dismissing me like I was an inconvenience. He knows he screwed up. Good. Then he can live with the consequences. She hung up and found Mitchell staring at her. The feds really are a problem, he said quietly. If they think the organization is unstable, they might accelerate their investigation, try to flip people while everyone's vulnerable. I know. Adriana rubbed her temples, feeling the first stirrings of a headache. But I can't stop now. If I back down, Lucien will think he can control me through intimidation, and I won't live like that. My daughter won't grow up watching her mother be diminished. So what do? We move faster. How quickly can we complete the account transfers? 48 hours? Maybe less if we push. Push. I want everything locked down by Friday morning. Everything. The next 36 hours were a blur of legal documents, digital transfers, and increasingly desperate attempts by Lucien's team to halt the process. His lawyers filed emergency motions. His accountants demanded audits. His mother called 6 more times, each conversation more pointed than the last. Adriana ignored it all and kept working. By Thursday afternoon, she'd successfully transferred control of 17 separate business entities, locked access to 4 offshore accounts totaling over $30 million, and restructured the ownership of 8 properties in 3 boroughs. The DeMarco empire that Lucien had built his identity around was evaporating in real time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it, because every single transaction was legal. Every transfer was authorized by agreements he'd signed years ago without reading carefully. Every restructuring was supported by documentation that would hold up in any court. She'd built him an empire with trapdoors only she could open, and now she was opening them all. Mitchell called her at 6 p.m., his voice tight with tension. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that wears FBI badges. 2 agents just showed up at my office asking questions about the DeMarco restructuring. They wanted to know if it was connected to any ongoing criminal investigations. Adriana's blood went cold. What did you tell them? That I couldn't discuss client matters without a subpoena. But Adriana, they're not going away. This is exactly what Marco warned about. The restructuring is drawing federal attention. She thought fast, weighing options and consequences. Did they mention Lucien specifically? Not by name, but they asked about ownership changes in entities currently under federal scrutiny. That's not subtle. No, it's not. She stared out her office window at the Manhattan skyline, the city lights beginning to glow as dusk settled. But it might actually work in our favor. How do you figure? If the feds are watching Lucian closely, he can't retaliate against me without drawing more attention. Every move he makes will be scrutinized. He's trapped. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. That's actually brilliant and terrifying. It's survival. Adriana pulled up her calendar. What's our completion percentage on the restructuring? 87%. We're almost done. Finish it tonight. I want everything locked down before the weekend. Oh, Adriana, the team is exhausted. We've been working around the clock for... I know, and I appreciate it more than I can say. But we're so close, Mitchell. If we stop now, if we give Lucien even a few days to organize a response, he might find a way to undo what we've done. I need this finished. She heard him sigh. Okay, we'll push through, but you owe my team about 1,000 hours of sleep and probably therapy. Bill me, she said, and meant it. By Friday morning, it was done. Every asset transferred, every account locked, every business entity restructured. Adriana sat in her new apartment with her laptop open, looking at the final spreadsheet that represented the complete dissolution of everything she'd built with Lucien. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like grief. Not for Lucien. She was done mourning what they'd had, but for the version of herself who'd believed that love and loyalty mattered more than pride. The woman who'd worked 18-hour days to build something real and lasting, only to watch it be treated like it was worthless. That woman was gone now. In her place was someone harder, sharper, less willing to accept invisibility as the price of partnership. Her phone rang. Lucien. She almost didn't answer, then decided he deserved to hear this directly. What have you done? His voice was raw, desperate in a way she'd never heard. Adriana, what the hell have you done? I took back what was mine. You destroyed me. You destroyed everything we built. No, Lucien. I destroyed everything I built. You just stood in the middle of it and pretended it was yours. My lawyers say the restructuring is legal, that every transfer is supported by agreements I signed. Agreements you wrote. Yes. You planned this. For years you've been planning to take everything. No, she said quietly. For years, I've been protecting both of us from exactly this kind of situation. I just never thought I'd be the threat I was protecting against. She could hear him breathing, harsh and ragged. The feds are asking questions. They're all over my businesses, my accounts. Marco says we might have people flipping because everyone thinks the organization is falling apart. Then maybe you should have thought about organizational stability before you bought your mistress a Mercedes. Damn it, Adriana. This isn't about Natasha. This is about you destroying 6 years of work. 6 years of building something real. I built something real, she interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. You played make-believe on top of it. And the second you forgot who actually held the foundation together, it all came crashing down. I'm sorry. The words came out broken, almost childlike. I know I hurt you. I know what I did was wrong. But please, you have to stop this. You have to help me fix this before everything falls apart completely. Why would I do that? Because you love me. Because we have a child together. Because I don't love you anymore, Adriana said, and realized as she spoke that it was true. The love had died somewhere between the Mercedes and the dismissive look in his eyes, burned away by the pure oxygen of rage and clarity. And our child deserves better than a father who thinks infidelity is a forgivable mistake and threats are an acceptable negotiation tactic. Adriana, goodbye, Lucien. She hung up and turned off her phone, sitting in the sudden silence of her new apartment. Through the windows, she could see the city continuing on, indifferent to the small drama of one woman reclaiming her life from a man who'd taken it for granted. Her hand moved to her stomach, to the barely there curve where her daughter was growing. Just you and me now, she whispered. And I promise, sweetheart, you'll never have to choose between love and self-respect. You'll never have to make yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. The intercom buzzed. Rebecca's voice came through. Adriana, there's someone here to see you. She says her name is Natasha. Adriana froze. Of all the people she'd expected to show up at her door, Lucien's mistress hadn't made the list. Send her up, she said finally. 2 minutes later, she opened her door to find the blonde girl from the sidewalk standing in her hallway, looking significantly less polished than she had 3 days ago. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her expensive dress wrinkled, and she was clutching a designer handbag like a lifeline. "Mrs. DeMarco," Natasha said, "can we talk?" "It's Ms. Vale now," Adriana corrected. "But yes, come in." Natasha stood in the middle of Adriana's living room, looking entirely out of place, like a hothouse orchid dropped into a stark modern gallery. She twisted the strap of her handbag between manicured fingers, her gaze darting around the apartment as if cataloging escape routes. "I probably shouldn't be here," she said finally. "No," Adriana agreed, settling into an armchair and gesturing for the girl to sit. "You probably shouldn't, but you came anyway, so let's hear it." Natasha perched on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid with tension. Up close, without the glow of Lucien's attention illuminating her, she looked younger than Adriana had realized. 22, maybe 23, still young enough to believe that expensive gifts meant love. "I didn't know he was married," Natasha said in a rush. "I mean, not really married. He told me you were separated, that the divorce was already in progress and you were just dragging it out to hurt him." "Of course he did." Adriana kept her voice neutral, watching the girl's face for tells. "What else did he tell you?" "That you were cold, unfeeling, that you'd never really loved him. You just wanted access to his money and his family's connections." Natasha's voice wavered. "He said you were trying to destroy him out of spite. And you believed him?" "I wanted to believe him." The girl's eyes filled with tears. I thought he was different." "He was older, sophisticated. He made me feel special, like I mattered." Adriana felt an unexpected stab of sympathy. She remembered being young and stupid, back before law school hardened her, back when she still thought love was enough. "When did you figure out he was lying?" "Tuesday night, after you confronted us." Natasha wiped at her eyes, smearing mascara. "He took me back to this penthouse. Not the one where you lived, a different one in Chelsea. And he was different, angry, distracted. He kept making phone calls, yelling at people, and then his mother showed up." That got Adriana's attention. "Isabella came to see you?" "She came to see him, but I was there, and she—" Natasha swallowed hard. "She looked at me like I was garbage, like I was something dirty he'd tracked in on his shoes. And she said that I was a fool if I thought I was anything more than a distraction, that you were the real power in the family, and now that you'd left, everything was going to fall apart." "Isabella said that?" Word for word, and then she looked at Lucien and said, "You've destroyed us for a child who probably can't even spell her own name." That's when I started to understand. Adriana leaned back, processing this information. Isabella acknowledging her value, even in anger, was unexpected. The old woman had spent 6 years treating Adriana like an outsider who'd somehow tricked her way into the family. To hear that she'd recognized the truth, even if only in the context of loss, felt oddly validating. "So you came here to what? Apologize?" Adriana asked. "I came here because I'm scared." Natasha's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "After his mother left, Lucian started drinking, and he got mean. Started saying things about what happens to people who betray him, who make him look weak. And I realized that the man I thought I knew doesn't exist. That version of Lucien, the charming one who bought me presents and made me laugh, that was just a mask." "Yes," Adriana said quietly. "It was." "But you saw through it. You must have seen it from the beginning." "No, I saw it eventually, but not soon enough." Adriana studied the girl across from her, seeing the cracks in her composure, the trembling hands, the fear she was trying to hide. "What did he do to you, Natasha?" "Nothing. Not yet. But Wednesday morning, I told him I was leaving, that this was too complicated, that I didn't want to be involved in whatever was happening between you two, and he—" She stopped, took a shaky breath. "He grabbed my arm and told me I didn't get to leave, that I knew too much about his business, and if I walked away, he'd make sure I regretted it." Ice flooded through Adriana's veins. She'd known Lucien could be threatening when his control was challenged, but she'd never seen him turn that violence toward someone he supposedly cared about. Then again, she'd never seen him backed into a corner like this before. "Did he hurt you?" He bruised my arm. Nothing serious. But the look in his eyes, Mrs. DeMarco, I mean Ms. Vele, I think he might actually be dangerous. He is dangerous, Adriana said flatly. That's something you need to understand. The legitimate businesses, the restaurants, the real estate, those are window dressing. The DeMarco family built their fortune on things that would put them in prison if anyone could prove it. And right now, Lucian is watching everything he thought he owned slip away. That makes him unpredictable. Natasha's face went pale. What should I do? Leave the city, today. Go stay with family, friends, anyone who lives far enough away that Lucian won't casually run into you. Don't tell him where you're going. Don't answer his calls. Just disappear. I can't just... I have a job, an apartment. My whole life is here. Your whole life will be worth nothing if Lucian decides you're a liability. Adriana stood and walked to her desk, pulling out a business card. This is my lawyer. Call him. Tell him I sent you. He'll help you break your lease, handle any legal issues that come up. But Natasha, you need to take this seriously. The man you thought you knew doesn't exist. The real Lucian is cornered and desperate, and that makes him lethal. Natasha took the card with shaking hands. I'm sorry for my part in this. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am sorry. I believe you. And surprisingly, Adriana did. The girl had been a pawn, manipulated by someone much more skilled at deception. But Natasha, next time a man tells you his wife doesn't understand him, assume he's lying. After the girl left, Adriana stood at her window watching the street below, waiting to see Natasha emerge from the building. She did, a small figure in expensive clothes, hurrying toward the subway with her phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling someone to ask if she could stay with them. Probably starting to understand just how thoroughly she'd been used. Adriana's phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on after Natasha's arrival, and now messages were flooding in. Most were from Mitchell's team with updates on the final phases of the restructuring, but one was from an unknown number, and the message made her stomach drop. You think you've won. You haven't. This isn't over. She stared at the text, analyzing the wording, the implicit threat. It could be from Lucien, though the number was blocked. Could be from Marco or one of the other associates. Could even be from Isabella, though the matriarch usually preferred direct confrontation. Whoever it was, they were right about one thing. This wasn't over. The weekend passed in tense silence. Adriana stayed in her apartment, working remotely and monitoring the cascade of consequences her actions had triggered. The financial press was having a field day with the DeMarco situation, speculation running wild about internal power struggles and potential criminal connections. Several of Lucien's business partners had quietly started distancing themselves, canceling meetings and declining to comment on the restructuring. The empire was fracturing, and everyone could see it. Monday morning brought federal agents to her door. Adriana had been expecting them, had prepared for this moment with the same meticulous attention she brought to everything. She was dressed professionally, her apartment was immaculate, and she had Mitchell on speed dial. The agents were exactly what she'd expected. A man and a woman in dark suits, carrying badges and wearing expressions of practiced neutrality. The woman did the talking. Ms. Vale? I'm Agent Sarah Chen. This is Agent Michael Torres. We're with the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force. We'd like to ask you some questions about your husband. Ex-husband, Adriana corrected, opening the door wider. And you're welcome to ask questions, but I'll need to call my attorney first. Of course. Agent Chen's smile didn't reach her eyes. We appreciate your cooperation. Mitchell arrived 20 minutes later, looking slightly disheveled, but sharp-eyed and alert. He settled next to Adriana on the sofa, while the agents took the chairs across from them. My client is willing to answer questions, Mitchell said, but I'll advise her not to respond if anything ventures into privileged territory. Understood. Agent Chen pulled out a notepad, though Adriana suspected everything was being recorded. Ms. Vale, can you tell us about the recent restructuring of businesses associated with Lucien DeMarco? I exercised contractual rights I held in various corporate entities, Adriana said calmly. All transactions were legal and properly documented. Why now? After 6 years of marriage? I'm filing for divorce. It seemed prudent to clarify ownership of marital assets before the proceedings became contentious. That's quite an understatement, Agent Torres said. Our understanding is that you've essentially dismantled Mr. DeMarco's entire business empire. I've restructured entities I created and managed. If those entities represented the bulk of what you're calling his empire, that says more about Mr. DeMarco's actual business acumen than it does about my actions. Agent Chen leaned forward slightly. Ms. Vale, we've been investigating the DeMarco organization for 3 years. We know that significant portions of their income come from illegal activities, loan sharking, protection rackets, money laundering. Are you telling us you were unaware of this? Mitchell's hand moved to Adriana's arm, a warning. She ignored it. I'm telling you that I provided legal consulting services to legitimate business entities. If money was flowing into those businesses from questionable sources, I wasn't made aware of it. My work focused on corporate structure, regulatory compliance, and contract negotiation. Convenient, Agent Torres said. Thorough, Adriana corrected. I kept meticulous records of every transaction, every consultation, every piece of advice I provided. All of it relates to legitimate business operations. We'd like to see those records. Get a subpoena, Mitchell said immediately. My client has cooperated with your questions, but she's not turning over privileged work product without a court order. The agents exchanged glances. Agent Chen pulled out a photograph and slid it across the coffee table. It showed Lucien at what looked like a restaurant, sitting across from a man Adriana recognized as Angelo Russo, the head of a rival crime family. Do you know who this is? Agent Chen asked. It's my husband having dinner. I wasn't there, so I couldn't tell you who his companion was. That's Angelo Russo. 3 weeks ago, your husband met with him to discuss territory disputes. We have audio recordings of that conversation. Adriana kept her face carefully neutral. I'm afraid I don't know what that has to do with me. It has to do with you because that meeting was set up using your phone, Agent Torres said. Your number appears in Russo's call records. You arranged the time and location. Her mind raced, pulling up the memory. 3 weeks ago, Lucien had asked her to call a number and set up a meeting. He'd said it was a potential investor for the restaurant group, someone who wanted privacy. She'd made the call, arranged the meeting, and thought nothing more of it. I occasionally managed my husband's schedule, she said carefully. If I made a call at his request, I wouldn't necessarily know who I was calling or why. So you're saying you were just following orders? I'm saying I performed administrative tasks like any spouse might do. I didn't interrogate my husband about the purpose of every phone call. Agent Chen sat back, studying Adriana with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Ms. Vale, I'm going to be direct with you. We've been building a case against the DeMarco organization for years, but we've never been able to make anything stick because someone very clever has been creating legal protections that obscure the criminal activity. Someone with significant legal expertise and intimate knowledge of corporate structure. And you think that someone is me. We think you're smart enough to have built an insurance policy. Documentation that proves what you knew and when you knew it, kept somewhere safe in case you ever needed leverage. The room went very quiet. Adriana could feel Mitchell's tension radiating from beside her, could see the calculation in the agent's eyes. They were fishing, hoping she'd either confirm their theory or panic and say something incriminating. She did neither. I think we're done here, she said calmly. If you have specific allegations against me, charge me. Otherwise, this conversation is over. We're not accusing you of anything, Agent Chen said. Yet. But Ms. Vale, the ship is sinking. Lucien's organization is falling apart. And when it does, people are going to start looking for life rafts. If you have information that could help us, now would be the time to share it. And if I did have such information, hypothetically, what would you offer in exchange? Mitchell made a noise of protest, but Adriana held up a hand, silencing him. Agent Torres leaned forward. Full immunity, witness protection if you felt you were in danger, a chance to walk away clean and start over. That's quite an offer. It's a good offer. Better than what you'll get if we build the case without your cooperation and you end up charged alongside your husband. Adriana stood, signaling that the meeting was over. I appreciate your directness, Agent Chen, but I'm not interested in your offer. I haven't committed any crimes. I have no information about criminal activities, and I'm not interested in betraying my husband's confidences, even if our marriage is ending. The agent stood as well, clearly disappointed but not surprised. Agent Chen handed Adriana a business card. If you change your mind, call me. The offer won't stay open forever. After they left, Mitchell rounded on her. What the hell was that? You let them walk in here and accuse you of being complicit in organized crime, and you didn't shut it down immediately? I wanted to hear what they had, Adriana said, walking to her window and looking out at the city. And now I know. They have evidence of Lucien's criminal activities, but nothing concrete linking me to it, which means my paper trail is as clean as I thought. They'll get a subpoena. They'll tear through every document you've ever created. Let them. They won't find anything incriminating because I never created anything incriminating. Every structure I built was legally sound, every transaction was properly documented and apparently legitimate. The fact that Lucien used those structures to launder money doesn't make me criminally liable. Adriana, you can't be this naive. If they want to charge you, they'll find a way. Then they'll have to catch me first. She turned to face him, and something in her expression made him take a step back. Mitchell, I spent 6 years building protections for Lucien. Do you really think I didn't build any for myself? What are you talking about? I'm talking about documentation, recordings, evidence that I had no knowledge of the criminal aspects of Lucien's business. Every time he asked me to do something that seemed questionable, I documented it. Every conversation where he deliberately kept me in the dark about the source of funds or the purpose of a transaction, I recorded it. Mitchell's eyes went wide. You've been building a case against him. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference. Where is this documentation? Safe. Somewhere Lucien can't reach it, and somewhere the FBI won't find it unless I choose to hand it over. She moved away from the window. The agents were right about one thing. I did build an insurance policy, but I'm not ready to use it yet. Why not? If you have evidence that could put Lucien away and clear your name, why wouldn't you use it? Because it's leverage, and right now leverage is the only thing keeping me safe. Adriana pulled up her phone, checking messages. Lucien's operation is imploding, his associates are panicking, and the feds are circling. If I hand over evidence now, I lose my protection. But if I keep it as a threat, everyone has a reason to leave me alone. That's a dangerous game. Everything about this situation is dangerous. I'm just choosing which risks to take. Her phone rang. Marco Castellano. She answered on speaker. Adriana, we have a problem. We have several problems, Marco. You'll need to be more specific. Angelo Russo is making a move on our territory in Brooklyn. 3 of our collection points got hit last night, and 2 of our guys are in the hospital. He's taking advantage of the chaos you created. I didn't create chaos. I removed myself from an untenable situation. What Lucien's rivals choose to do with that information is not my responsibility. The hell it isn't, Marco's voice rose. You knew what taking apart the business would do. You knew we'd be vulnerable. And now people are getting hurt. Adriana felt a flicker of guilt, quickly suppressed. Then Lucien should have thought about organizational stability before he humiliated me on a public street. People are going to die over this, Adriana. Is that really what you want? Blood on your hands because you couldn't forgive one mistake? Don't you dare put this on me, she snapped. I spent 6 years keeping this organization legitimate and stable. I built the structures that protected everyone from federal prosecution and rival families. And the second I needed support, the second I needed basic respect, what did I get? Threats, intimidation, your boss telling me I didn't get to leave. Because we need you, can't you see that? Without you, this all falls apart. Then maybe it should fall apart. Maybe an organization built on violence and intimidation deserves to crumble. Marco was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder, colder. You better hope the feds get to you before we do. Because, Adriana, if Russo's people kill one of ours, if this war you started costs us lives, there are going to be people in this organization who want revenge. And I don't know if I can protect you from them. Is that a threat, Marco? It's a reality check. You're not untouchable anymore. You're not protected by marriage or loyalty or the fear of what Lucien might do. You're just a woman who knows too much and has made a lot of powerful people very angry. The line went dead. Mitchell was staring at her with an expression somewhere between horror and admiration. He's right, you know. You're exposed now. No protection from the family, no legal shield from the FBI. If either side decides you're more valuable dead than alive, I know. Adriana's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. She was showing now, just slightly, the curve of her pregnancy visible under loose clothing. That's why I need to move faster. Faster to what? To the end game. She pulled up her laptop, accessing files she'd kept encrypted and separate from everything else. I'm going to give the FBI what they want, but on my terms, with protections in place that ensure my safety and my daughter's future. You're going to flip on Lucien? I'm going to trade information for immunity and protection. There's a difference. Mitchell ran his hands through his hair. Adriana, once you do this, there's no going back. You'll be testifying against your daughter's father, you'll be destroying what's left of the family, and you'll be putting a target on your back that will never disappear. The target's already there, she said quietly. At least this way, I'm the one deciding where to aim. She called Agent Chen that afternoon and arranged a meeting for the following day. Then she called her obstetrician and scheduled an emergency appointment, suddenly paranoid that the stress of the last week might have hurt the baby. Dr. Morrison confirmed that everything was fine, the heartbeat strong and steady, the tiny human inside her blissfully unaware of the chaos surrounding her arrival. You need to reduce your stress levels, the doctor said gently. I know that's easier said than done, but for the baby's sake, you need to take care of yourself. I will, Adriana promised, meaning it. After this week, things will be calmer. One way or another, that would be true. That night, alone in her apartment with files spread across her dining table, Adriana compiled everything she had. 6 years of documentation, carefully organized and annotated. Emails where Lucien discussed criminal activities, assuming she wouldn't understand the implications. Recordings of conversations where he admitted to extortion, money laundering, bribery. Financial records showing the true sources of income for supposedly legitimate businesses. Names, dates, locations, amounts. Everything the FBI would need to dismantle the DeMarco organization completely. She'd been collecting it for 3 years, ever since the first time Lucien's temper had scared her. Little pieces of insurance, stored away against a future she'd hoped would never come. But the future had arrived, and it was time to use what she'd built. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You can't hide forever. We know where you live. She stared at the message, feeling ice slide down her spine. Then she forwarded it to Agent Chen with a simple note. I think we should move up our meeting. Tomorrow might be too late. Chen called within minutes. Ms. Vale, are you in immediate danger? I don't know. But I'm receiving threats, and I have information you want. How quickly can you get me into protective custody? How quickly can you pack? I'm already packed. Then we can have agents there in 20 minutes. Adriana looked around her apartment at the life she'd built in secret, the bolt hole that was supposed to keep her safe. It had lasted less than a week. Make it 15, she said. And Agent Chen? I'm going to need guarantees. Full immunity, witness protection if necessary, and protection for my unborn child. All of it in writing before I hand over a single document. Done, start packing. Adriana moved through the apartment with methodical efficiency, taking only what mattered. Clothes, documents, the ultrasound images of her daughter. Everything else could stay. It was all just things, and things could be replaced. What couldn't be replaced was her life, her daughter's future. The chance to finally step out of the shadows and into something real. The agents arrived in 12 minutes, a team of 4 led by Chen and Torres. They swept the apartment, checked the hallways, and escorted Adriana to an unmarked car with the kind of efficiency that came from practice. As they pulled away from the building, Adriana looked back one last time at the windows of her apartment. Somewhere in this city, Lucien was probably plotting his next move. Marco was trying to hold together a fracturing organization, and Angelo Russo was circling like a shark smelling blood. Let them circle. Let them plot. She was done being afraid. She had the nuclear option now, and she wasn't afraid to use it. The safe house was in Queens, a nondescript building on a quiet street where neighbors minded their own business and questions were never asked. Agent Chen led Adriana through a side entrance, up 3 flights of stairs, and into an apartment that looked like it had been furnished by someone with no concept of comfort or style. Beige walls, generic furniture, windows covered with heavy curtains that blocked out most of the light. It's temporary, Chen said, reading Adriana's expression. Just until we can assess the level of threat and make more permanent arrangements. How long is temporary? Could be days, could be weeks. Depends on how cooperative you are and how quickly we can move on the information you provide. Adriana set down her bag and moved to the window, carefully lifting one corner of the curtain to look out at the street below. Everything looked normal. Cars parked along the curb, a bodega on the corner, someone walking a dog. The ordinary rhythm of city life, completely unaware that 3 floors up, a woman was about to bring down an empire. Agent Torres appeared in the doorway carrying a file box. Conference room is set up whenever you're ready. We've got a stenographer, recording equipment, and a prosecutor standing by to draft the immunity agreement. Give me an hour, Adriana said. I need to organize my thoughts. After they left, she sat at the small dining table and pulled out her laptop, reviewing the documentation she'd compiled over the past 3 years. Every piece of evidence was tagged, categorized, and annotated with dates and context. It was the kind of meticulous organization that had made her invaluable to Lucien, and now it would be the thing that destroyed him. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her phone buzzed. Mitchell. She'd texted him from the car to let him know she was safe, but he'd been calling every 15 minutes since then. I'm fine, she said, answering before he could launch into panic mode. Fine? Adriana, you're in FBI custody preparing to testify against a crime family. That's pretty far from fine. I'm alive, I'm safe, and I'm making the only choice that ensures my daughter has a future. That's fine enough for me. She could hear him pacing on the other end of the line, his footsteps echoing in what was probably his office. What do you need from me? Keep handling the divorce proceedings. I want that finalized as quickly as possible. And Mitchell, if anything happens to me, there's a file in my safety deposit box at Chase. The key is with Rebecca. Inside you'll find instructions for my daughter's care and a trust fund that should see her through college and beyond. Jesus Christ, Adriana. You're talking like you're writing a will. I'm being practical. The people I'm about to betray don't forgive easily. The FBI will protect you. The FBI will try. But we both know that determined people can get to anyone if they're willing to pay the price. She took a breath, steadying herself. Just promise me that if something happens, you'll make sure my daughter knows I loved her, that everything I did was to give her a better life than I had. Nothing's going to happen. You're going to testify, Lucien and his associates are going to prison, and you're going to raise your daughter in peace. I hope you're right. The conference room looked exactly like every other interrogation room Adriana had seen in movies and television shows. Metal table, uncomfortable chairs, cameras mounted in the corners, and a one-way mirror that probably had half a dozen people behind it watching her every move. Agent Chen sat across from her with Torres at her side, a stenographer in the corner, and a prosecutor named David Halloway, who looked young enough to still be in law school but apparently had enough authority to grant immunity. Let's start with the basics, Chen said, opening a notebook. How long have you been aware of Lucien DeMarco's criminal activities? Adriana considered the question carefully. The truth was complicated, layered with self-deception and willful ignorance. I suspected something was wrong about 3 months into our marriage. Lucien would have meetings he wouldn't explain, phone calls he'd take in another room, cash that appeared without any legitimate source. But I didn't have proof, and I didn't ask questions. Why not? Because I loved him. Because I wanted to believe that the man I married was who he pretended to be. And because by the time I started to suspect the truth, I was already in too deep to walk away easily. Chen made a note. When did suspicion become certainty? About 2 years into the marriage. Lucien asked me to structure a series of shell companies to hold real estate assets. He said it was for tax purposes, which was technically true, but the amounts of money flowing through those companies didn't match any legitimate income I could identify. That's when I started documenting everything. Torres leaned forward. You've been collecting evidence for 4 years? 3.5. I started keeping records about 6 months after I realized what was happening. Why? If you knew your husband was involved in criminal activity, why didn't you come forward immediately? It was the question Adriana had been asking herself for years, the one she'd never had a good answer for. Fear partly, love, stupidly, and this belief that maybe I could change things from the inside. If I stayed, if I helped build legitimate businesses, maybe eventually the criminal activities would fade away and we'd have something real. That's incredibly naive, Halloway said, his tone cutting. Yes, Adriana agreed quietly. It was. But I was young and in love, and I wanted to believe the best of someone I'd committed my life to. I'm sure you've never made a poor decision based on emotion, Mr. Holloway, but some of us are more fallible. The prosecutor's face reddened slightly, and Chen shot him a warning look before turning back to Adriana. Let's talk about what you documented. What exactly do you have? Adriana opened her laptop and pulled up the master file. Emails, recordings, financial documents, organizational charts showing the real structure of the DeMarco operation. I have evidence of money laundering, extortion, bribery of public officials, loan sharking, and connections to at least 3 other organized crime families in the tri-state area. The room went very quiet. How much of this can you authenticate? Torres asked. All of it. Every document is either something I created myself or something I witnessed being created. Every recording is clearly dated and backed up in multiple locations. Every financial transaction can be traced through banks and shell companies that I personally established. Chen and Torres exchanged looks. Holloway was typing furiously on his laptop, probably already drafting indictments in his head. This is more than we hoped for, Chen said carefully. Ms. Vale, with this evidence, we can dismantle the entire DeMarco organization. We can prosecute not just Lucien, but his associates, his partners, the politicians he's been bribing. This is the biggest organized crime case we've had in a decade. I know. Adriana's hand moved to her stomach, a protective gesture that was becoming habitual. That's why I need guarantees, full immunity for anything I may have done while married to Lucien, witness protection if I feel I'm in danger, and financial support to relocate and start over. Done, Holloway said immediately. I can have the immunity agreement drafted within the hour. Full protection from prosecution for any crimes committed prior to today's date, provided you give truthful testimony and turn over all evidence in your possession. I want it to cover my daughter, too. Anything that happens after she's born, any retaliation against her, we'll protect both of you, Chen promised. That's not negotiable. Adriana nodded, feeling something tight in her chest finally loosen. Then let's begin. They worked through the night, Adriana walking them through years of documentation with the same precision she'd brought to creating it. She explained the shell company structures, identified the sources of laundered money, named the public officials who'd been bribed and the amounts they'd received. She provided recordings of Lucien discussing criminal activities, explaining how certain problems had been handled with violence or intimidation. With every piece of evidence she handed over, she felt the weight of her marriage lifting. All those years of looking the other way, of telling herself she was building something legitimate even as she enabled corruption, it was all coming out now, exposed in the harsh fluorescent light of the conference room. By 3 a.m, Chen called for a break. Adriana stumbled back to the apartment they'd given her, collapsed on the bed fully clothed, and slept for 4 hours before her phone woke her. The number was blocked, but she answered anyway. You made a mistake. Lucien's voice was rough, strained, nothing like the smooth confidence she'd once found attractive. A very big mistake. How did you get this number? I have resources you don't know about, friends you've never met, and they're very interested in finding you. Adriana sat up, suddenly wide awake. Is that a threat? It's a warning. You think the FBI can protect you? They can't even protect their own witnesses. Ask them about Tommy Marconi. He testified against my uncle 10 years ago. We found him in Iowa living under a new name. He lasted 6 months. Ice flooded through her veins. Lucien, I know you're scared. I know you think you're doing the right thing. But Adriana, you're making this worse for both of us. If you testify, if you give them evidence, they won't just come after me. They'll come after my mother, Marco, everyone we've ever worked with. And those people have families, Adriana. They have children who will grow up without fathers because you couldn't forgive one mistake. You humiliated me. You threatened me. You chose a stranger over your pregnant wife. I know, his voice cracked. I know what I did, and I've regretted it every second since you walked away. But this is scorched earth, Adriana. This is you burning down everything we built out of spite. I built it, she said coldly. You just stood in the middle and pretended it was yours. Then take it back. Take the businesses, the money, all of it. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't do this. Don't put our daughter's father in prison for the rest of his life. For a moment, just a brief, treacherous moment, she almost wavered. The man on the phone sounded genuinely broken. genuinely sorry. He sounded like the Lucien she'd married before the power and arrogance had corrupted whatever goodness he'd once possessed. Then she remembered Natasha's bruised arm, the threats from Marco, the way Isabella had looked at her like she was disposable, the text messages warning her that they knew where she lived. "You did this to yourself," she said quietly. "Every choice that led us here was yours, and now you get to live with the consequences." She hung up and immediately told Agent Chen about the call. Within an hour, they'd moved her to a different safe house, changed her phone number, and added 2 more agents to her security detail. "He found you once," Chen said grimly. "We can't assume he won't try again." The next week passed in a blur of testimony, document review, and legal negotiations. Holloway's immunity agreement was ironclad, protecting Adriana from prosecution for anything she may have done while married to Lucien. In exchange, she gave them everything: names, dates, amounts, locations. She identified corrupt police officers, bribed judges, politicians who'd taken money in exchange for favorable zoning decisions. The evidence was so comprehensive that the FBI began executing warrants within 72 hours. They raided DeMarco properties, froze accounts, arrested associates. The news coverage was relentless. Every channel carried stories about the fall of one of New York's most powerful crime families, brought down by the wife who'd built their empire. Adriana watched it all from her safe house, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, just a hollow emptiness where her marriage used to be. On the 8th day of her cooperation, Agent Chen brought news that changed everything. "We arrested Lucien this morning," she said, sitting across from Adriana in the cramped living room. "He's being held without bail, charged with racketeering, money laundering, extortion, and about 15 other counts. His lawyer is already talking about a plea deal." Adriana's hand moved protectively to her stomach. She was 17 weeks now, showing enough that strangers on the street would notice. "What kind of plea deal?" 20 years? Eligible for parole in 12, in exchange for testimony against Angelo Russo and information about the organization's connections to families in New Jersey and Philadelphia. He'd betray his allies to reduce his sentence? "Everyone betrays everyone when they're facing life in prison," Chen said. "But Adriana, there's something else. During the arrest, Lucien asked to speak with you. He says he has information about a threat to your safety that he'll only share directly." "Absolutely not." "I figured you'd say that, but I wanted to give you the option." Adriana stood and moved to the window, looking out at another unfamiliar street in another temporary refuge. She'd been in protective custody for 8 days, and already she felt like a ghost, disconnected from the world, living in a strange limbo between her old life and whatever came next. "What kind of threat?" she asked finally. "He wouldn't say. Just that there are people who want revenge for what you've done, and he's the only one who can warn you. It's manipulation. He's trying to scare me into seeing him, probably hoping he can talk me out of testifying." "Probably," Chen agreed. "But what if he's telling the truth? What if there is a credible threat we don't know about?" Adriana closed her eyes, torn between the desire to never see Lucien again and the nagging fear that he might actually be trying to protect her. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the humiliation, some part of her still remembered the man he'd been in the beginning. The one who'd made her laugh, who'd promised to build something beautiful with her. That man was probably gone, consumed by the reality of who Lucien DeMarco really was. But the memory lingered. "Supervised meeting," she said finally. "Multiple agents present, everything recorded. And I want it made clear that nothing he says will change my testimony." "Understood." They brought Lucien to a federal building in Manhattan 2 days later. Adriana waited in a conference room with Chen and Torres, her hands folded on the table to hide their trembling. When the door opened and Lucien walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, she barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt and shadowed. His expensive haircut had grown out, making him look older, harder. But it was his eyes that shocked her most. They were empty, defeated in a way she'd never seen. The guard chained him to a bolt in the floor and stepped back. Lucien looked at Adriana for a long moment, his gaze moving from her face to her stomach, where their daughter was growing. "You're showing," he said quietly. 16 weeks. "Do you know, is it a girl, Elena? I'm naming her Elena Vale." Something flickered across his face, pain or regret or both. "Not DeMarco?" "No." He nodded like he'd expected that answer. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. Agent Chen said you had information about a threat. I'm here for that. Nothing else. Right. Business. He laughed, but it was a hollow sound. Everything with us always came down to business in the end, didn't it? Lucien, if you have something to tell me, tell me. Otherwise, I'm leaving. He leaned forward as much as the chains would allow. Angelo Russo put a contract out on you. $50,000 to anyone who can find you and make you disappear before the trial. He blames you for the power vacuum that's let him expand his territory, and he wants to make sure you can't testify against him if the FBI ever builds a case. Adriana felt the blood drain from her face. Chen and Torres immediately started making notes, already planning how to respond to this new threat. How do you know this? Chen demanded. Because Russo's people approached me in lockup. They wanted to know if I'd help them find Adriana in exchange for protection on the inside. I told them to go to hell. Why? Adriana asked. Why protect me now after everything? Lucien met her eyes, and for the first time since he'd walked in, she saw something real there. Because she's my daughter. Because whatever else I've done, whatever mistakes I've made, I won't let our child grow up without a mother. I won't let her carry that weight. The conference room was silent, except for the scratch of Torres's pen on paper. There's more, Lucien continued. Marco is planning something. I don't know what exactly, but he's been meeting with some of the younger guys, the ones who think violence is the answer to everything. He blames you for the organization falling apart, and he's not as forgiving as I am. Forgiving, Adriana repeated, her voice sharp. You threatened me. You told me I'd regret leaving. I was angry, scared. I just watched everything I thought I owned disappear in 48 hours, and I lashed out. But Adriana, I never would have actually hurt you. You have to know that. I don't know anything about you anymore. Maybe I never did. He flinched like she'd slapped him. Fair enough. But regardless of what you think of me, please take these threats seriously. Russo doesn't make idle promises, and Marco loved this family more than anything. He's not going to let its destruction go unanswered. Agent Chen stood. We appreciate the information, Mr. DeMarco. We'll take appropriate precautions. Wait. Lucien's voice was urgent. Adriana, please, just give me one more minute. Chen looked at Adriana, who nodded reluctantly. The agent stepped back but didn't leave the room. I'm sorry, Lucien said. For all of it. For Natasha. For taking you for granted. For building my entire identity on work that was really yours. You deserved better than what I gave you. Elena deserves better than me as a father. She'll never know you, Adriana said quietly. I'll make sure of that. I'll tell her you were a complicated man who made terrible choices, and I'll make sure she never follows in your footsteps. Good. That's good. His voice cracked. Will you tell her one other thing? Will you tell her that her father's biggest regret was losing her mother? That if I could go back and change everything, I would? Adriana stood, signaling that the meeting was over. I'll tell her that her father was a cautionary tale, that power without principle leads to nothing but destruction, and I'll make sure she grows up strong enough that she never needs a man to define her worth. She walked to the door, but Lucien's voice stopped her one last time. I loved you. I know you don't believe it now, but I did. I do. Adriana looked back at him, at the man she'd married in another lifetime. The problem, Lucien, is that your love was never enough. It was always conditional, always dependent on me staying small enough to fit into your world. Real love, the kind Elena will learn about, makes you bigger. It lifts you up. What you offered was a cage made of gold, and I'm done being imprisoned by other people's limitations. She left him chained to the floor and didn't look back. The FBI took Russo's threat seriously. They moved Adriana to a third safe house, this one in New Jersey, and increased her security detail to 6 agents rotating in 12-hour shifts. Mitchell visited twice, bringing legal documents for her to sign and updates on the divorce proceedings. Lucien's not contesting anything, he said, spreading papers across the kitchen table. He's agreed to sign over all remaining assets, waive any claim to custody, and accept a complete dissolution of the marriage. His lawyer says he just wants it over quickly. How generous of him. Adriana, I know you're angry, but this is actually good news. We can finalize everything within a month. You'll be legally free of him before the baby comes. She signed where he indicated, her signature sharp and decisive. What about his mother? Isabella's been suspiciously quiet. From what I hear, she's focused on damage control, trying to protect family assets from federal seizure, maintaining relationships with allies, positioning her nephew Dominic to potentially rebuild once the dust settles. You're old news to her. I was always old news to her. I was just useful for a while. Her phone rang, Agent Chen's personal line. Adriana answered immediately. We have a situation, Chen said without preamble. Marco Castellano was found dead an hour ago. Single gunshot to the head, execution style. It happened in his car outside his apartment in Brooklyn. Adriana sat down slowly, processing the information. Russo? That's our assumption. He's consolidating power, eliminating DeMarco loyalists. But Adriana, before Marco died, he made a phone call to a number we've traced to a burner phone purchased yesterday in Queens. The call lasted 43 seconds, and we caught part of it on a wiretap we had on Marco's phone. What did he say? He gave someone your approximate location, not the exact address, but the neighborhood. He told whoever was on the other end that the feds were protecting you, but that security changed shifts at 8 p.m., and there was a 12-minute window when you'd be vulnerable. The kitchen tilted slightly. Adriana gripped the edge of the table, forcing herself to breathe. When do they change shifts? Tonight, in 4 hours. So someone's coming for me. We don't know that for sure, but we're not taking chances. We're moving you again, right now. Pack only essentials. We leave in 10 minutes. Adriana ended up in Pennsylvania in a cabin so remote that the nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. The FBI brought in specialists, people who understood witness protection and how to keep someone alive when determined killers were hunting them. They taught her how to spot surveillance, how to vary her routines, how to disappear if she needed to. She learned it all with the grim determination of someone who understood that her daughter's life depended on her survival. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out. Until then, Adriana lived in isolation, seeing only federal agents and occasionally Mitchell when legal matters required her signature. Dr. Morrison made house calls to monitor the pregnancy, reporting that despite the stress, Elena was developing perfectly. She's a fighter, the doctor said during one visit, pressing the Doppler to Adriana's swelling stomach. The rapid flutter of a heartbeat filled the room. Strong and resilient, just like her mother. Adriana listened to her daughter's heartbeat and made a promise. She would survive this. She would testify, see Lucien and his associates convicted, and then she would build a life where Elena could grow up safe and loved. No matter what it took. 3 weeks before the trial, Agent Chen brought unexpected news. Lucien took a plea deal, she said, sitting across from Adriana in the cabin's small living room. 25 years, no possibility of parole for 15. In exchange, he's testifying against Angelo Russo, giving us details about corrupt officials and providing information about interstate criminal operations. So I don't have to testify. You still have to testify against some of the other defendants, politicians, judges, associates, but the most dangerous part, testifying against Lucien directly, that's off the table now. Adriana should have felt relief. Instead, she felt cheated somehow. She'd been preparing herself to face him in court, to tell the world what he'd done, to stand up and be counted instead of hiding in shadows. When does he go to prison? Sentencing is in 6 weeks. He'll be transferred to a federal facility upstate. Maximum security, isolated from general population for his own protection. His own protection? He's testifying against people who have long memories and longer reach. The moment he enters the system, he becomes a target. Chen paused. He asked if you'd consider bringing Elena to see him. Once she's born. Just once. So he can meet his daughter. Absolutely not. I told him you'd say that. After Chen left, Adriana sat in the gathering dusk, one hand on her belly where Elena was kicking with increasing vigor. 25 years. Lucien would be in his 60s when he got out, and Elena would be a grown woman who'd never known her father as anything but a name in old news articles. That should have felt like justice. Instead, it just felt sad. The weeks crawled by with agonizing slowness, each day bleeding into the next in the monotonous routine of protective custody. Adriana testified 3 times, once against a state judge who'd taken bribes, once against 2 city councilmen who'd accepted money for zoning favors, and once in a deposition against several of Lucien's former associates. Each time she told the truth with clinical precision, her voice steady, her hands folded calmly on the table before her. Inside, she was counting down to a different day entirely. Elena's due date was April 23rd. Adriana marked off each passing day on a calendar Agent Chen had brought her, watching her belly swell until moving became awkward and sleep became impossible. Dr. Morrison visited weekly, monitoring the baby's position and assuring Adriana that everything was progressing normally despite the extraordinary stress. "Your blood pressure is elevated," the doctor said during a visit in early April. "Not dangerously so, but I want you resting as much as possible. This last month is crucial." "I'm in protective custody in a cabin in the middle of nowhere," Adriana said dryly. "Rest is pretty much all I do." "Good. Keep doing it." But rest was easier prescribed than achieved. Adriana's mind wouldn't stop moving, racing through possibilities and contingencies, with the same obsessive attention to detail that had once made her invaluable to Lucy Yen's organization. She thought about the trial results, 3 convictions so far, with more coming. She thought about Angelo Russo, still free but under increasing federal pressure. She thought about Isabella DeMarco, who'd reportedly retreated to the family's estate in the Hamptons and refused all interview requests. Mostly, though, she thought about what came after. The FBI had offered her witness protection, a new name, a new city, a completely fresh start. But Adriana had spent 6 years being invisible, hiding her intelligence and diminishing herself to fit into Lucien's world. The idea of spending the rest of her life in hiding, constantly looking over her shoulder, felt like trading one prison for another. "I want my life back," she told Agent Chen during one of their regular check-ins. "Not a sanitized version of it, not some safe little existence in Nebraska under a fake name. I want to be Adriana Vale again. I want to build something real." Chen looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and frustration. "Adriana, there are still people who want you dead. Russo's organization, remnants of Lucien's old crew, maybe even some of the people you testified against. Witness protection isn't punishment, it's survival. It's hiding, and I'm done hiding." "Then what do you want?" Adriana had been thinking about that question for weeks, turning it over in her mind during the long, empty hours. "I want to use what I know. I spent 6 years learning how criminal organizations hide money and structure their operations to avoid prosecution. That knowledge is valuable, not just to the FBI, but to legitimate businesses that want to make sure they're not accidentally facilitating money laundering or criminal activity." "You want to be a consultant?" "I want to build a firm that specializes in financial transparency and anti-corruption compliance. Help companies identify vulnerabilities in their systems that criminals might exploit. Use everything I learned in Lucien's world to make the legitimate business world safer." Chen was quiet for a moment, considering. "That would keep you visible, public. It would be easier for someone to find you." "I know, but I'd rather live my life in the open and deal with the risks than spend the next 50 years looking over my shoulder." Adriana's hand moved to her belly, where Elena was doing what felt like gymnastics. "I want my daughter to see a mother who stands up for herself, who faces consequences instead of running from them, who uses her mistakes to build something better." "You're one of the bravest people I've ever met," Chen said quietly. "Or one of the most stubborn. I honestly can't tell which." "Can it be both?" Elena arrived on April 19th, 4 days early and apparently impatient to meet the world. Adriana's water broke at 3 in the morning, and within 6 hours she was holding a tiny, furious human who'd inherited her dark hair and what looked like Lucien's bone structure. The baby had perfect fingers and toes, lungs that worked magnificently, and absolutely no patience for anything that displeased her. "She's beautiful, doctor," Morrison said, placing the cleaned and swaddled infant in Adriana's arms. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, completely healthy." Adriana looked down at her daughter's face, at the way Elena's tiny hand wrapped around her finger with surprising strength, and felt something crack open inside her chest. All the anger, all the hurt, all the calculated revenge that had driven her for the past months, it all melted away in the presence of this perfect, innocent creature who depended entirely on her. "Hello, Elena," she whispered. "I'm your mother, and I promise you, sweetheart, you're going to have the life I never did. You're going to grow up knowing your own worth. You're going to be strong and brave and absolutely fearless." Elena yawned, unimpressed, and fell asleep. Agent Chen visited the hospital that afternoon, bringing flowers and news that made Adriana's blood run cold. Angelo Russo was arrested this morning, she said, settling into the chair beside Adriana's bed. We executed warrants based on testimony from Lucien and some of the other cooperating witnesses. Caught him at his estate in New Jersey with enough evidence to put him away for life. That's good news, isn't it? It is. But Adriana, before they took him in, Russo made a statement to the press. He said that certain people had betrayed the old code, that snitches and traitors never go unpunished, and that justice would be served eventually. He threatened me publicly? He didn't name you specifically, but yes, essentially. His lawyers are already trying to walk it back, claiming he was speaking generally about the erosion of traditional values. Chen's expression was grim. The point is, he's locked up now, but his organization isn't. And they heard what he said. Adriana looked down at Elena, sleeping peacefully in her arms, completely unaware of the danger surrounding her arrival into the world. How long do we have to stay in protective custody? The FBI recommends at least 6 months, maybe longer, depending on threat assessment. No. Adriana, I said no. I'm not raising my daughter in hiding. I'm not teaching her that the way to deal with bullies and criminals is to run away and hope they forget about you. Adriana's voice was steel wrapped in silk. I have money from the divorce settlement. I have skills. I have connections. I'm going back to New York and I'm building the life I planned. You could die. Everyone dies eventually. But I refuse to spend whatever time I have being afraid. Chen stared at her for a long moment, then shook her head with something that might have been admiration. You're absolutely insane. Probably. But I'm done letting other people's violence dictate my choices. Mitchell came to visit 2 days later, bringing legal documents and unconcealed worry. He took one look at Elena and immediately melted, all his professional composure disappearing in the face of 10 pounds of adorable baby. She's perfect, he breathed, carefully holding her like she might break. Adriana, she's absolutely perfect. I know. Adriana smiled, watching her fierce lawyer transform into a puddle of sentiment. Mitchell, I need your help with something. Anything. I want to start a consulting firm. Financial compliance and anti-corruption services. I need you to handle the incorporation, draft the founding documents, and help me find office space in Manhattan. He looked up sharply, nearly dropping Elena in the process. Manhattan? Adriana, you can't be serious. The FBI wants you in witness protection, and you're talking about opening an office in the city where you have the most enemies? I'm completely serious. I've already started drafting a business plan. I have a list of potential clients, corporations that have been burned by money laundering scandals and want to make sure it doesn't happen again. There's a real market for this. There's also a real chance someone will kill you. Then I'll hire security, good security, the kind that actually knows what they're doing. She took Elena back from him, settling the baby against her shoulder. Mitchell, I spent 6 years being invisible because it was safer that way. I built Lucien's empire in the shadows while he took all the credit. I testified against criminals from behind protective barriers with my identity obscured. I'm done being invisible. Even if being visible gets you killed? Even then. Because I'd rather my daughter remember a mother who stood up for herself than one who spent her life in hiding. Mitchell ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd seen 100 times. Fine, I'll help you. But I'm also hiring the best security firm in the city, and you're going to let them do their job. Deal. The divorce was finalized on May 3rd, exactly 3 months after Adriana had walked away from Lucien on that Manhattan sidewalk. The proceedings were brief, almost anticlimactic. Lucien signed away all claims from federal prison via video conference, his lawyer handling the technical details. Adriana attended from the FBI safe house, with Elena sleeping in a carrier beside her, and within 20 minutes, it was done. She was Adriana Vale again, legally and completely. The woman who'd been Mrs. DeMarco existed only in memory and old photographs. That afternoon, she received an unexpected visitor. Isabella DeMarco arrived at the safe house in a town car, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral, and asked to see Adriana. Agent Chen was immediately suspicious. Absolutely not. She could be working with Russo's people, trying to get close enough to— Let her in, Adriana said calmly. She's not here to hurt me. If Isabella wanted me dead, she has easier ways to arrange it. The older woman looked diminished somehow, her usual imperious bearing softened by what might have been grief or exhaustion. She sat across from Adriana in the small living room, her gaze moving from Adriana's face to Elena, asleep in her carrier.
She looks like him, Isabella said quietly. Around the eyes. Yes. May I hold her? Adriana hesitated, then carefully transferred Elena to Isabella's arms. The old woman held the baby with practiced ease, her expression softening in a way Adriana had never seen. I had 3 sons, Isabella said, not looking up from Elena's face. Lucien, Antonio, and Marco. Antonio died when he was 17. Wrong place, wrong time, caught in crossfire meant for someone else. Marco died last month, executed by our enemies. And Lucien is in prison for the next 25 years, which means he's as good as dead to this family. I'm sorry for your losses. Are you? I thought you'd be celebrating. You destroyed everything I spent 50 years building. I didn't destroy it. I just stopped protecting it. Adriana met Isabella's gaze steadily. Your family's empire was built on violence and crime. It was always going to fall eventually.
I just accelerated the timeline. By betraying my son. By refusing to be destroyed along with him. Isabella looked back down at Elena, her fingers gently stroking the baby's dark hair. I never liked you. You were too smart, too educated, too different from the women our men usually married. I thought Lucien was making a mistake. You made that very clear. But I was wrong. You weren't the problem. You were the only thing holding it all together. Isabella's voice cracked slightly. After you left, everything fell apart so fast. Lucien went crazy, making stupid decisions and alienating allies. Marco became paranoid, seeing enemies everywhere. The organization fractured, rival families moved in, the FBI picked us apart piece by piece, and I realized that you were the foundation, not the decoration, the foundation. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that I understand now. What you did, leaving and taking everything with you, it wasn't spite or revenge, it was survival. And I can't fault you for choosing survival. Isabella carefully transferred Elena back to Adriana's arms. I came here to ask you something. A favor, though I have no right to ask. What kind of favor? Let my granddaughter know her family history, not the crimes, not the violence, but the other parts. The way her great-grandfather came to this country with nothing and built something. The way her grandmother fought to keep her sons safe in a world that wanted to destroy them. The way her father, Isabella's voice broke. The way her father loved her mother enough to save her life, even when it meant losing everything. Adriana felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. Lucien didn't save my life. He saved my own. He gave you the warning about Russo. He told you about Marco's plan. He could have stayed silent, could have let his enemies take care of the problem you created. But he chose to protect you instead, even though it meant testifying against people who will absolutely try to kill him in prison. Isabella stood, preparing to leave. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm not even asking you to let him meet his daughter. I'm just asking that someday, when Elena asks about her father, you tell her the truth. All of it. The good and the bad. After Isabella left, Adriana sat for a long time holding Elena, thinking about truth and memory, and the stories we tell to make sense of our lives. She'd planned to tell Elena that her father was a criminal who'd made terrible choices. Now she wondered if maybe the story was more complicated than that. Maybe Lucien had been a man who'd made terrible choices, but still loved his daughter enough to protect her. Maybe he'd been both villain and victim, corrupted by the world he was born into, but capable of redemption at the end. Maybe everyone contained those contradictions. Vale Consulting opened its doors on June 15th in a modest office in Midtown. Adriana had 6 employees, 3 financial analysts, 2 former federal prosecutors, and a security expert who'd previously worked in corporate risk management. The security firm Mitchell hired provided round-the-clock protection, with armed guards rotating shifts and advanced surveillance systems monitoring every entrance. It was expensive, paranoid, and absolutely necessary. The first month was slow. Despite her credentials and the media attention her case had generated, corporations were hesitant to hire the woman who'd brought down a major crime family. Some worried about association with scandal. Others questioned whether someone who'd been married to a criminal could really help them avoid criminal entanglements. But gradually, carefully, Adriana built a reputation. She gave interviews about corporate vulnerability to money laundering, wrote articles about financial red flags that indicated criminal activity, and consulted for free with several nonprofits trying to clean up their donation processes. And slowly, the phone started ringing. By September, Vail Consulting had 15 employees and a client list that included 3 Fortune 500 companies and a major international bank. Adriana had become the go-to expert on financial crime prevention, the woman who'd seen corruption from the inside and now dedicated herself to fighting it from the outside. She worked from home 2 days a week so she could be with Elena, who was growing faster than seemed possible. The baby who'd been born so tiny and fragile was now 6 months old, sitting up on her own and showing signs of the same fierce determination that had driven Adriana to rebuild her life. "She's going to be a handful," Rebecca said one afternoon, watching Elena refuse to let go of a toy she'd decided belonged to her. "Stubborn, like her mother." "Stubborn like both her parents," Adriana corrected. "Lucien was many things, but he was never weak-willed." The mention of Lucien's name brought the usual complicated tangle of emotions. Adriana had followed his case through the news. His testimony against Russo had been devastating, providing details about interstate criminal operations that had led to dozens of additional arrests. As a result, Russo had been sentenced to life without parole, and several other major crime figures had taken plea deals rather than risk similar exposure. Lucien had done exactly what he'd promised. He'd given the FBI everything they needed to dismantle the organizations that threatened Adriana. And in doing so, he'd made himself a target in every prison in the federal system. The letter arrived in October, forwarded through Mitchell to avoid any security concerns. It was handwritten on lined paper, the kind sold in prison commissaries, and the handwriting was unmistakably Lucien's. Adriana stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. "Dear Adriana, I don't know if you'll read this. You have every right to burn it unopened, but I'm going to write it anyway because there are things I need to say, and I may never get another chance. First, I'm sorry. I've said that before, but I'm not sure I really meant it until now. Sitting in here with nothing but time to think about everything I destroyed, I finally understand the depth of what I did to you. I didn't just cheat. I didn't just humiliate you. I took the woman who built my entire world and treated her like she was worthless. I took your brilliance, your loyalty, your love, and I threw it away for meaningless validation from someone who didn't even know me. Second, thank you. My lawyers told me that you could have testified against me directly, could have buried me under evidence that would have guaranteed life without parole. Instead, you took a plea deal that gave me a chance, however small, of eventually getting out. I don't know if you did that for me or for Elena, but either way, I'm grateful. Third, I want you to know that I see you now. Really see you, in a way I was too arrogant to do before. You were never the woman behind my throne. You were the throne itself, and I was just a figurehead sitting on something you built. Everything I thought I'd accomplished was really your accomplishment. Every success was your success. And I was too stupid and self-absorbed to recognize that until I'd lost it all. My mother came to see me last month. She told me about meeting Elena. She said our daughter is beautiful and already showing signs of your strength. I'm glad. I'm glad she'll grow up with you as her example instead of me. You'll teach her to be brilliant and fierce and completely uncompromising in her own worth. I would have taught her to take power without earning it, to mistake control for respect. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even think I deserve it. But I want you to know that you were right about everything. You were right to leave. You were right to take back what was yours. You were right to protect yourself and our daughter from the wreckage I created. And you were right that I never really understood what love meant. I thought love was possession, control, having someone beautiful and brilliant reflect my own supposed greatness. But real love, the kind you tried to teach me, is about making each other bigger. It's about being proud of your partner's success instead of threatened by it. It's about building something together where both people are essential and valued. I know that now. I understand it now. And I hate myself for learning it too late. If Elena ever asks about me, please tell her the truth. Tell her that her father was a man who had everything and threw it away because he confused power with worth. Tell her that he spent the rest of his life regretting that mistake and trying to do better, even from prison. Tell her that the best thing he ever did was help create her, and the worst thing he ever did was lose her mother. and tell her that somewhere in a prison in upstate New York, there's a man who thinks about her every day and hopes she grows up to be exactly like you. I won't write again. This isn't the beginning of some redemption arc where I slowly win back your trust. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what I lost, and that I'm sorry. Lucia and Adriana read the letter 3 times, then set it aside and looked at Elena, playing on a blanket nearby with the fierce concentration only babies could achieve. Her daughter grabbed a toy, examined it critically, and then threw it aside in favor of something more interesting.
Your father wrote me a letter, Adriana said quietly. He says he's sorry. He says he finally understands what he did wrong. Elena gurgled, unimpressed. I don't know if I believe him, but I think maybe people can change, not all the way, not into completely different people, but enough to recognize their mistakes and try to do better. She picked up her phone and called Mitchell. I need you to arrange something for me. I want to take Elena to visit Lucien, just once.
Not for him, for her, so that someday when she asks if she ever met her father, I can tell her yes. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. The prison visit was scheduled for November 3rd, carefully arranged through the FBI and the Bureau of Prisons to ensure maximum security. Adriana drove upstate on a gray morning with Elena in her car seat, Agent Chen following in an unmarked car, and her heart in her throat. The facility was exactly as bleak as she'd expected. Concrete walls, razor wire, guards with expressionless faces watching every movement. They processed her through multiple security checkpoints, each one more invasive than the last, before finally leading her to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. Lucien was brought in wearing prison khakis, his hands cuffed in front of him. He'd lost more weight, his face gaunt and shadowed with premature aging. But when he saw Elena in Adriana's arms, his expression transformed into something almost painful in its vulnerability. She's so big, he said, his voice rough. I can't believe how much she's grown. 6 months old. Adriana sat down, settling Elena on her lap. The baby stared at Lucien with the solemn curiosity babies reserved for strangers. She looks like you. More than me, thank goodness. She has your bone structure, your stubborn chin. Lucien laughed, but it came out broken. Heaven help you if she inherited my temperament. I think she inherited mine. She's already extremely opinionated about what she does and doesn't want. They sat in awkward silence for a moment, the weight of everything between them making small talk feel absurd. I got your letter, Adriana said finally. I meant every word. I know. That's what scares me. Why? Because if you really understand what you did wrong, if you really see me now the way you should have all along, then it means we could have had something real. We could have been actual partners building something beautiful together. And instead, we got this. She gestured at the prison walls surrounding them. We got destruction and betrayal and a daughter who'll grow up knowing her father only through supervised prison visits. I'm sorry. I know. But sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give Elena her father back. Sorry doesn't return the 6 years I spent making myself smaller so you could feel bigger. Lucien's eyes were wet. What can I do? How can I make any of this right? You can't. That's what you need to understand. Some mistakes are permanent. Some choices can't be undone. Adriana stood, preparing to leave. But Lucien, I forgive you anyway. Not because you deserve it, not because it changes anything, but because I refuse to carry the weight of your betrayal for the rest of my life. I'm putting it down. I'm walking away free. Will you bring her again to visit? Adriana looked down at Elena, at her daughter's perfect face and curious eyes. Maybe. Once a year, perhaps. So she knows where she came from, but Lucien, you need to understand something. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for her. So she never has to wonder, never has to carry questions about her father that I could have answered. I understand. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. Adriana, for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. What you've built with your consulting firm, the way you've turned everything you learned in my world into something good. It's remarkable. You've become exactly who you were always meant to be. Yes, she said quietly. I have. It just took losing you to find myself. The drive back to the city felt like crossing a threshold. Adriana watched the prison disappear in her rearview mirror, taking with it the last complicated pieces of her marriage. She'd faced Lucien one final time, had looked him in the eye and forgiven him, and now she could finally let go completely. Elena babbled from her car seat, happy sounds that had no connection to the heavy conversation that had just occurred. To her, it had been just another outing, another stranger making faces at her. She would never remember this day, would never know that she'd met her father in a prison visiting room. But someday, when she asked, Adriana would be able to tell her the truth. All of it. The good and the bad, the love and the betrayal, the way her father had been both villain and victim. And Elena could make her own choices about what that meant. Vale Consulting continued to grow. By the end of the year, Adriana had 23 employees, offices in New York and Chicago, and a reputation as the foremost expert in corporate anti-corruption compliance. She gave a TED Talk about financial crime prevention that went viral. She testified before Congress about regulatory gaps that allowed money laundering. She wrote a book about her experiences that became an unexpected bestseller. And through it all, she raised Elena with the kind of fierce, protective love that came from knowing exactly how dangerous the world could be. On Elena's first birthday, Adriana threw a party at her apartment. Small, intimate, just close friends and trusted colleagues. Rebecca had baked a cake. Mitchell brought entirely too many presents. Agent Chen came with her wife and a stuffed animal that Elena immediately claimed as her favorite. As the party wound down, Adriana stood at her window holding her daughter, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. A year ago, she'd been pregnant and terrified, watching her marriage implode and her world fracture. Now she was here, alive, successful, surrounded by people who valued her for who she actually was, rather than what she could do for them. "See that city out there?" she whispered to Elena. "That's going to be yours someday. Not because you married someone powerful or inherited it from a family, but because you built something worth having with your own brilliance and strength." Elena yawned, unconcerned with her mother's grand pronouncements about the future. "You're going to be amazing," Adriana continued. "You're going to be smart and fierce and absolutely uncompromising in your own worth. You're going to know that you don't need anyone to validate you or define you or give you permission to be powerful." Mitchell appeared beside her holding 2 glasses of wine. Talking to her about world domination already? Never too early to start planning. He handed her a glass and they stood together, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled over Manhattan. "You did it," Mitchell said quietly. "You survived something that should have destroyed you, and you built something remarkable from the wreckage. I'm proud of you. Thank you for everything, for believing in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself. Always." 2 years later, Adriana received word that Angelo Russo had died in prison, killed by a rival gang member in what was officially called a dispute over commissary access. The real reason, according to Agent Chen, was that Russo had continued trying to run his organization from behind bars, and his successors had decided they were better off without his interference. With Russo gone, the last major threat to Adriana's safety evaporated. She could finally stop looking over her shoulder, could finally relax the security protocols that had governed her life since leaving Lucien. She chose to keep the security anyway, not out of fear, but out of practicality. She'd built something valuable, something that powerful people might want to destroy or corrupt. Better to stay protected than to take unnecessary risks. Elena grew into a toddler who asked 1,000 questions a day and refused to accept simple answers to complex problems. She was curious, fearless, and absolutely convinced that rules were negotiable if you argued your case effectively enough. "She's going to be a lawyer," Rebecca predicted, watching 3-year-old Elena explain in elaborate detail why bedtime should be delayed. "Or a prosecutor," Mitchell added. "She's got the cross-examination skills down already." "Or a CEO," Adriana said, watching her daughter negotiate with the kind of strategic thinking most adults never mastered. "She knows what she wants, and she's not afraid to demand it." When Elena was 4, she asked the question Adriana had been preparing for since birth. "Mama, why don't I have a daddy like the other kids?" They were sitting together at bedtime, Elena's favorite book spread across both their laps. Adriana had rehearsed this conversation 100 times, trying to find the right words to explain something impossibly complicated to someone so young. "You do have a daddy," she said carefully, "but he can't live with us." "Why not?" because he made some bad choices, and now he has to stay in a place far away where people go when they make really big mistakes. Elena considered this with the serious expression she wore when processing difficult concepts. Did he make bad choices to you? To me, yes, and to other people too. Are you sad? Sometimes, but mostly I'm grateful because his bad choices helped me learn to make better ones. And they gave me you, which is the best thing that ever happened to me. Will I meet him? Someday, if you want to. When you're older and can understand better. But Elena, I need you to know something important. Adriana turned so she could look directly into her daughter's eyes. Your daddy loved you very much. Even though he made mistakes, even though he hurt people, including me, he always wanted you to be safe and happy. Okay, Elena said, accepting this with the easy flexibility of childhood. Can we read the story now? As Adriana read about dragons and princesses and brave knights, she realized that she'd done it. She'd answered the question honestly without making Lucian into either a villain or a hero. She'd given Elena the truth in age-appropriate pieces, letting her daughter decide what it meant as she grew old enough to understand complexity. On what would have been their 10th wedding anniversary, Adriana received another letter from Lucian. It was shorter this time, just a single page. Adriana, I heard about your success, about the company, the book, the congressional testimony. I wanted to say congratulations. You've become exactly who I always knew you could be, if you had the freedom to shine. I also heard about Russo. I know that must feel like relief. One less threat, one less reason to be afraid. I'm glad. You deserve to live without fear. I'm up for parole review in 8 years. My lawyer thinks I have a good chance of getting out early because of my cooperation with the FBI. But even if I do, I want you to know that I won't contact you. I won't try to see Elena or disrupt the life you've built. You've earned your peace, and I won't be the one to shatter it. But I want you to know that I think about you both every day. I wonder what Elena looks like now, what makes her laugh, what questions she asks. I wonder if she's stubborn like you, if she's got your brilliant mind and fierce heart, and I hope that someday, when she's old enough to understand, you'll tell her that her father's biggest achievement wasn't building an empire or wielding power. It was knowing you, loving you, creating her. Everything else was just noise. Be well, Adriana. Be happy. Be exactly who you are. Lucian Adriana folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box with the first one, storing them away for Elena to read someday when she was ready. Then she went to find her daughter, who was building an elaborate tower out of blocks and narrating an epic story about the people who lived inside. Mama, come play, Elena demanded, pattering over on small feet to grab Adriana's hand. Okay, sweetheart, show me your tower. As she settled on the floor beside her daughter, helping to build walls and add decorative elements, Adriana realized that this was it. This was the life she'd fought for, the peace she'd earned through trials that would have broken someone less determined. She wasn't anyone's wife anymore, wasn't anyone's accessory or invisible support system. She was Adriana Vale, CEO, mother, survivor, expert in financial crime prevention who'd turned her darkest experiences into a force for positive change. She was fully seen at last, not as the woman behind someone else's throne, but as the architect who'd built her own empire from nothing. And this time, no one could take it away from her because she'd built it on a foundation of her own strength, her own intelligence, her own uncompromising worth. Elena knocked over part of the tower and immediately started rebuilding it, completely undaunted by the setback. It's okay, Mama. We just make it better. Adriana smiled, watching her daughter work with the kind of focused determination that promised great things in her future. Yes, baby, we make it better. That's exactly what we do. And in that moment, surrounded by blocks and laughter, and the simple joy of an ordinary evening with her extraordinary daughter, Adriana understood that she had everything she needed. Not the life she'd planned when she married Lucian, but something better. A life built entirely on her own terms, shaped by her own choices, owned completely by her own power. She'd walked through fire and emerged on the other side not just intact, but transformed. Stronger, braver, free. And she would never again accept invisibility as the price of love.